My mother-in-law secretly recorded 47 videos of me breastfeeding and posted them to her mommy blog with 8,000 subscribers. So I went no contact. That was 3 years ago. She's been living in her car outside my office building for the past 6 months. I became best friends with this guy in high school, and when he got married at 25, his husband turned into my other best friend. We were there for each other through it all, on losses, parents dying, amazing times and terrible ones. No one else could crack me up like they did. We loved hanging out together, going on trips to other countries, and planning so many more. We had a long-standing plan that we would all retire together somewhere hot, pooling our money to get the best place we could. His husband once loudly complained that since he was a little older than us, he would die first, and we'd be having fun without him. I remember feeling a sense of foreboding when he said that, and told him not to speak words that might be casting shadows in the future. I wonder now if I knew what was coming on some level. A few short years later, my best friend started to get ill. We could see that he had a strange gait when he walked. He was losing weight and suffering all manner of strange symptoms, tremors, dizzy spells, etc. His husband and I were frantic with worry and begged him to see a doctor. He's a scientist, so I knew he would have a good idea of what was happening. He told me that he thought it was Parkinson's disease, and he couldn't face going to a doctor and getting a diagnosis because his biggest fear was that it was motor neuron disease, and he couldn't even contemplate such a terrible disease. He worked away through the week, and we would call each other. He'd confide about incidents where he had collapsed and ask me not to tell his husband. I'd agree because I didn't want my husband to be as worried as I was. Then he went rapidly downhill. He could hardly walk and was covered in bruises because he was falling over all the time. He cried and told me he was sure it was motor neuron and begged me to make sure he wouldn't suffer at the end. I looked up the cost of taking him to Dignitas in Switzerland and told him I was sure I could swing it if it came to that. Finally, the day came when he collapsed and had a seizure at work. They called an ambulance, and his husband called me to let me know and said he would keep me up to date. I told him that I was actually relieved. At least we had a fair chance of finding out what we were dealing with. I went to visit him in the hospital the next day and found him in an incredibly confused state. He thought we were still teenagers and were at work together. I was obviously really worried and asked the staff what was going on and why he was so confused. His doctor came over to give us their diagnosis. Dr. Leon pulled up a chair beside the bed, her expression grave but compassionate. She introduced herself as the attending neurologist and explained they'd run extensive tests since his admission. My hand found Ellison's automatically, squeezing gently as she spoke. His fingers trembled against mine. Whether from the disease or fear, I couldn't tell. The MRI results, combined with the EMG studies and your reported symptoms, are consistent with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, she said carefully. ALS, also known as motor neuron disease. The room tilted. Ellison's worst nightmare, the thing he'd been too terrified to face, was now our reality. His hand went slack in mine for a moment before gripping back with surprising strength. I watched his face crumble, tears streaming down his cheeks as he shook his head repeatedly. No, 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 he whispered, his voice breaking. Not that. Anything but that. Dr. Leon continued gently, explaining the progression we could expect. 6 to 12 months, she estimated, based on how rapidly his symptoms had advanced. She talked about support services, palliative care options, clinical trials, but her words faded into background noise. All I could focus on was Ellison's devastated expression and the way his whole body shook with silent sobs. I shifted closer on the bed, wrapping my arm around his shoulders. He turned into me, burying his face against my chest like he used to do back in high school when his parents fought. My own tears fell freely as I held him, whispering promises I desperately wanted to keep. I'm here, I murmured against his hair. Every step of the way, I'm here. We'll figure this out together. You're not alone in this. The door burst open suddenly. David stood there, still in his work suit, his face flushed from running. His eyes took in the scene, me holding Ellison, both of us crying, Dr. Leon's sympathetic expression, and something shifted in his features. The relief at finding his husband gave way to something harder, colder. What's happening? He demanded, moving swiftly to Ellison's other side. What did they say? Ellison lifted his head from my chest, reaching for David with his free hand. It's ALS, he choked out. 6 to 12 months. David's face went white. He grabbed Ellison's hand, but his eyes kept flicking to where my arm still rested around Ellison's shoulders. I started to pull back, but Ellison's fingers tightened on my shirt, keeping me close. We need to discuss treatment options, Dr. Leon said softly. There are medications that can help slow progression, and we'll want to set up a care team. Thank you, doctor, David interrupted, his voice sharp. Could you give us a moment? Family needs some privacy right now. The words hit like a slap. Family, as if I hadn't been part of their family for over a decade. Dr. Leon nodded and quietly left. I started to follow, but Ellison's grip on my shirt tightened again. Caleb stays, he said weakly. David's jaw clenched. Of course, I just thought, never mind. He pulled a chair close, taking Ellison's other hand. We're going to fight this baby, whatever it takes. The next hour passed in a blur of discussions about treatment plans, insurance coverage, and practical considerations. David took charge, asking pointed questions and taking notes on his phone. I mostly stayed quiet, offering support through gentle touches and reassuring squeezes of Ellison's hand. Every time I did, I noticed David's eyes tracking the movement, his mouth tightening. When Ellison dozed off, exhausted from the emotional toll, David finally looked directly at me. Thanks for being here, he said, though his tone suggested anything but gratitude. I can take it from here. You should probably get some rest. I can stay, I offered. In case he wakes up and he needs rest. David cut me off. And when he wakes up, I'll be here, his husband. The emphasis on the last word was unmistakable. I stood slowly, looking down at Ellison's sleeping face. Even in rest, the strain showed in the deep lines around his eyes, the hollow of his cheeks. I wanted to smooth his hair back, tell him again that I'd be there, but David's stare felt like a physical barrier. I'll come by tomorrow, I said quietly. David nodded curtly. Text first. He might be having tests or sleeping. We need to manage his energy carefully now. I left the hospital feeling unsettled. David and I had been close friends for years, united in our love for Ellison, but something had shifted in that hospital room, something I couldn't quite name. Over the next few days, I tried to visit daily. The first time, David said Ellison was having an MRI. The second, he was sleeping and couldn't be disturbed. The third, they were meeting with specialists. Each excuse sounded reasonable, but the pattern was becoming clear. My text to Ellison went unanswered. I told myself he was processing, dealing with the diagnosis in his own way. David responded occasionally, always brief. He's resting. Bad day today. Maybe tomorrow. A week passed before I finally pushed back. I showed up at the hospital without texting first, bringing Ellison's favorite terrible gas station coffee and the crossword puzzle book he always kept at his desk. David intercepted me in the hallway. He's not up for visitors, he said flatly. David, come on, he's my best friend. I just want to see him for 5 minutes. Your best friend needs to focus on his health right now, not entertaining guests. Entertaining guests? Are you serious right now? David's face flushed. Do you have any idea what this is like? Watching him deteriorate, knowing what's coming? He doesn't need people treating him like a sideshow attraction. That's not what I'm doing, and you know it. Do I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're making this about you and your need to feel involved. The accusation stung. I've known him longer than you have, I said, immediately regretting the words. David's eyes went cold. But I'm his husband. I took vows. In sickness and in health. This is the sickness part, and I'm going to protect him whether you understand that or not. He turned and walked back into Ellison's room, closing the door firmly behind him. Through the small window, I could see Ellison in bed, awake now, looking toward the door with confusion. David said something to him, and Ellison's face fell. He nodded slowly, then turned away. I stood there for a long moment, holding the cold coffee and crossword book, before finally walking away. The pattern continued for weeks. I'd text Ellison directly, pouring out my heart, telling him about my day, sharing stupid jokes I knew would make him laugh. Sometimes I'd see the read receipts, but no responses came. When I texted David to ask about visiting, the excuses grew more elaborate. Ellison was having a bad reaction to medication. The physical therapist was coming. They were trying a new treatment that required rest. Then came the gut punch. Scrolling through social media, I saw a photo posted by a mutual friend. Sending love to our brave warrior. The caption read. The picture showed Ellison in what looked like the same hospital room, surrounded by several of our friends from college. He was smiling weakly, clearly tired but engaged. The timestamp was from yesterday, a day when David had told me Ellison couldn't have any visitors due to severe fatigue. My hands shook as I screenshot the photo and sent it to David. Apparently he was well enough for visitors yesterday. His response came an hour later. They stopped by briefly during a good moment. Ellison needs people who understand boundaries right now. Please respect that. Boundaries. The word echoed in my head. What boundaries had I crossed? Being there when he got his diagnosis, holding him while he cried, promising to stay by his side? I tried calling Ellison directly, but it went straight to voicemail. His sister reached out a few days later, asking if everything was okay between us. She mentioned that Ellison had been asking about me, but David told her I was dealing with the diagnosis in my own way and needed space. That's not true, I told her, my voice cracking. I've been trying to see him for weeks. David keeps turning me away. She sounded confused but promised to talk to Ellison. The next day, she texted that she'd spoken to David, who explained that my visits had been upsetting to Ellison and that the doctors recommended limiting his emotional stress. She apologized but said she had to defer to David's judgment as Ellison's husband. 3 months crawled by. 3 months of unanswered texts, blocked visits, and secondhand updates through mutual friends. I threw myself into research, learning everything I could about ALS, new treatments, clinical trials. I compiled information packets, thinking maybe if I couldn't see Ellison, I could at least help from afar. When I tried to drop them off at the hospital, I was told I wasn't on the approved visitor list. Some nights I'd park outside their house, looking up at the lit windows, wondering if Ellison was okay, if he was scared, if he missed our stupid inside jokes as much as I did. Once I saw David helping him from the car to the front door, Ellison's legs barely supporting him even with assistance. I wanted to jump out, to help, to just see my friend's face, but I stayed frozen in my car, respecting the boundaries I didn't understand. Then came the call that shattered my world all over again. Ellison's sister, her voice urgent. Caleb, where are you? Ellison's been asking for you. He's at St. Mary's Hospice. He keeps saying your name. I was in my car before she finished talking, speeding across town with tears blurring my vision. Hospice. How had it progressed so fast? Why hadn't anyone told me he'd gotten so bad? The hospice was quiet, painted in soft colors meant to be soothing, but that only emphasized the finality of the place. Ellison's sister met me in the lobby, her eyes red-rimmed. Room 12, she said. David's not here right now. He went home to shower and get some things. Hurry. I practically ran down the hallway, my heart hammering. The door to room 12 was slightly open. I pushed through and stopped short. Ellison lay in the bed, a shadow of himself. The weight loss was dramatic, his cheekbones sharp under paper-thin skin, his arms skeletal where they lay on top of the blanket. Oxygen tubes ran to his nose, and various machines beeped softly around him. But his eyes were still the same warm brown, and they widened when they found mine. Caleb, his voice was barely a whisper, slurred from the disease's progression. You came. I crossed to the bed in 2 strides, taking his hand gently. His fingers were so thin, but they curled around mine with what little strength remained. Of course I came. I've been trying to see you for months. Confusion clouded his features. David said you couldn't handle seeing me like this. Said it was too hard for you. The words hit like a physical blow. What? No, Ellison, no. I've been begging to see you. David kept saying you weren't up for visitors, that you needed rest, that I was crossing boundaries. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. Boundaries? You? Never. Never crossed anything. Missed you. Missed your terrible jokes. I laughed through my own tears, squeezing his hand. Why did the scarecrow win an award? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Why? Because he was outstanding in his field. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. So bad. Missed that. Missed you. Where were you? I'm here now, I said, my voice breaking. I'm here. We sat in silence for a moment, years of friendship compressed into the gentle pressure of our joined hands. There was so much I wanted to say, so much time we'd lost, but I could see how much effort each breath cost him. The tickets, he said suddenly. Costa Rica. Still want to go? Of course. When you're better, we'll. Caleb, his eyes held mine. We both know, but the tickets. In my desk. Promise you'll think of us there. Before I could respond, the door slammed open. David stood there, his face contorted with rage. What the hell are you doing here? I scrambled to my feet, still holding Ellison's frail hand. David's face was twisted with fury as he strode into the room, his eyes blazing with an intensity I'd never seen before. I asked you a question, he snarled, moving to position himself between me and the bed. How did you get in here? You're not on the visitor list. His sister called me. I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. Ellison's been asking for me. David whirled toward the bed, his expression shifting to something softer but still edged with anger. Baby, you're confused. The medication makes you foggy sometimes. Caleb hasn't been able to handle seeing you like this, remember? I explained this. Ellison's fingers tightened weakly around mine. No, he wheezed, each word clearly costing him. You said he didn't want, but he's here. He came. Of course he came now, David said, his voice dripping with disdain. When you're at your worst, when you can barely speak to defend yourself. How convenient. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. David, what are you talking about? I've been trying to see him for 3 months. You've blocked me at every turn. concern. Because you upset him. David's voice rose, causing one of the nurses to peek in with concern. He waved her away and lowered his voice to a hiss. Every time you visited in the hospital, he'd be agitated for hours afterward. The doctor said emotional stress could accelerate the progression. That's not true, Ellison whispered from the bed. Never upset. Missed him. Kept asking. David's jaw clenched as he turned back to his husband. You're confused, sweetheart. The disease affects cognition. You don't remember how upset you were. I watched in horror as David essentially gaslit his dying husband. The man I'd considered a friend, who'd shared holidays and vacations with us, was deliberately rewriting reality. Ellison's eyes darted between us, confusion and distress evident in his features. I need you to leave, David said, turning back to me. Now. Ellison wants me here, I said firmly, not moving. Ellison doesn't know what he wants. The disease. Stop. Ellison's voice was stronger than it had been, fueled by obvious frustration. My mind still works. Want Caleb here, my friend, my choice. David's face went through a series of expressions: hurt, anger, something that looked almost like betrayal. Your friend, he repeated bitterly. Always your friend first, isn't it? Even now, even after everything I've done, everything I've sacrificed, it's still about your precious friendship. The words hung in the air, revealing more than David probably intended. I suddenly understood with crystal clarity what had been happening. This wasn't about protecting Ellison from stress. This was about David's jealousy, his need to be the only one in Ellison's life during these final months. David, I said carefully, we've all been friends for years. This doesn't have to be a competition. Competition? He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. You think this is about competition? I'm his husband. I'm the one who's been here every single day, watching him fade away, changing his clothes when he can't manage, helping him to the bathroom, watching the man I love disappear piece by piece. Where were you? I was trying to be here. You wouldn't let me, because he didn't need you. David's composure finally cracked completely. He needed peace. He needed care. He needed to focus on treatment without you showing up and reminding him of everything he was losing. Do you know what he said after you left that first day? He cried for hours about all the plans you'd made, all the trips you'd never take. You were a reminder of the future he'd never have. I felt the words like physical blows, each one designed to hurt. But then I looked at Ellison's face and saw the truth there. He was shaking his head weakly, tears streaming down his cheeks. No, he managed. Wanted to talk about. The trips. Made me. Happy to remember. You took that. Took him away. David's face crumbled for a moment before hardening again. I protected you. That's what spouses do. You isolated him, I said, my own anger finally breaking through. You took away his choices, his friends, his support system. That's not protection, David. That's control. How dare you? Stop! Ellison's voice cracked with the effort. Both of you. Stop, please. We both turned to look at him. The effort of speaking had clearly exhausted him, but his eyes were fierce with determination. David, he whispered. Love you. Always. But you were wrong. Needed Caleb. Needed my friend. You took that choice. Not fair. David sank into the chair beside the bed, his face a mask of anguish. I was trying to protect you. I couldn't stand watching you light up when he walked in. The way you two would laugh at things I didn't understand. You're dying. And I felt like I was already losing you to him. The admission hung heavy in the room. I understood then that David's actions, however cruel, came from a place of desperate fear and grief. He was losing his husband and couldn't bear to share what little time remained. Not losing, Ellison said softly, reaching for David's hand with tremendous effort. Different love, both important, needed both. The door opened again, and Ellison's sister entered with a nurse. She took in the scene, David hunched in the chair, me standing awkwardly by the bed, Ellison looking distressed despite his weakness. What's going on? She asked carefully. Caleb was just leaving, David said automatically, but there was less venom in it now. No, Ellison said firmly. He stays. My choice. My time. My choice. The nurse, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, stepped forward. Mr. Andrew, you're getting agitated. This isn't good for your condition. My condition? Ellison managed a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. Dying anyway. Want my friend here. My choice. The nurse looked between all of us, clearly assessing the situation. If the patient wants someone here and they're not disruptive, they can stay. But if this continues to cause distress, I'll have to ask everyone to leave. David stood abruptly. I need some air, he said, his voice thick. He looked at Ellison, then at me, something breaking in his expression. 10 minutes. Then we need to talk about arrangements. He left quickly, and Ellison's sister followed after exchanging a meaningful look with the nurse. Suddenly, it was just Ellison and me again, like it had been countless times over the years. I'm sorry, I said quietly, sitting in the chair David had vacated. I didn't mean to cause a scene. Not your fault, Ellison said, his voice barely audible now. David, scared, angry, grief makes people do things. 3 months though, Ellison. 3 months of thinking you didn't want to see me. I know, found out 2 weeks ago. Sister let slip. You'd been trying. So angry, but too weak to fight him. We sat quietly for a moment. I could hear his labored breathing, see how much effort it took for him to keep his eyes open. The disease had ravaged him, stealing the vibrant scientist I'd known, and leaving this fragile shell. But his eyes were still the same, still held that spark of intelligence and humor that had drawn me to him all those years ago. Tell me, he whispered suddenly. Tell me about normal things. Your job, your terrible dating life. Make me laugh. So I did. I told him about my disastrous attempt at online dating, exaggerating the story to make him smile. I updated him on office gossip, shared the latest memes I'd saved specifically to show him. For a few precious minutes, we weren't in a hospice room. We were just two friends catching up, like we'd done 1,000 times before. When David returned, he looked calmer but still guarded. He stood in the doorway, watching us uncertainly. 5 more minutes, the nurse said gently. Then Mr. Andrew needs to rest. David nodded and approached the bed slowly. Ellison, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing what was best. Ellison's eyes moved between us. These two people he loved in such different ways. Both stay, he said firmly. Whatever time left, both stay. David's shoulders sagged. He pulled up another chair, sitting on Ellison's other side. The three of us existed in awkward silence for a moment before Ellison spoke again. The tickets, he said, looking at me. Costa Rica, in my desk, at home. Want you to have them. Ellison, David started, but Ellison cut him off with a look. 3 tickets, he continued with effort. 1 for each of us. Take my ashes, scatter them, where we were going, to retire both of you. Promise. I looked at David, seeing my own shock reflected in his face. Even now, even after everything, Ellison was trying to bridge the gap between us. Promise, he insisted, his voice fading. I promise, I said quietly. David hesitated, then nodded. I promise. Ellison smiled, the expression transforming his gaunt features. Good. Now, terrible joke. Please, 1 more. I thought for a moment, my throat tight with emotion. What do you call a bear with no teeth? His eyes crinkled slightly. What? A gummy bear. He made that sound again, the ghost of a laugh. So bad. Perfect. The nurse returned, checking monitors and adjusting his oxygen. He really does need to rest now, she said gently but firmly. I stood, leaning down to press a kiss to Ellison's forehead. I'll be back tomorrow, I promised. Better be, he whispered. No more boundaries. I looked at David, who nodded slightly. The anger was gone, replaced by exhaustion and grief. Text first, he said quietly, so we can coordinate. He has good mornings usually. It was a small concession, but it felt like a victory. I squeezed Ellison's hand one more time and headed for the door. Caleb, Ellison called weakly. I turned back. Thank you for not giving up. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and left the room. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, letting the tears I'd been holding back finally fall. 3 months we'd lost. 3 months of Ellison thinking I'd abandoned him, of me thinking he didn't want me there. 3 months that we'd never get back. Over the next 2 weeks, I visited every day. David and I established an uneasy truce, coordinating visits through terse text messages. Sometimes we overlapped, sitting on opposite sides of Ellison's bed like guards at a gate. The atmosphere was strained, but we both tried for Ellison's sake. I learned the rhythms of his decline. Mornings were indeed better. He could manage short conversations, weak smiles at my terrible jokes. Afternoons were harder, the medication making him drowsy and confused. Evenings were often spent in silence, just holding his hand while he drifted in and out of consciousness. David and I barely spoke during these overlapping visits, but I watched him with Ellison. Despite my anger at what he'd done, I couldn't deny his devotion. He knew exactly how Ellison liked his pillows arranged, could interpret every grimace of pain, anticipated needs before Ellison had to ask. He'd become an expert in a subject he'd never wanted to study, the care and comfort of a dying husband. One afternoon while Ellison slept, David spoke unexpectedly. I know you hate me. I looked up from the book I'd been pretending to read. I don't hate you. I hate what you did. I know. He stared at Ellison's sleeping face. I hate it too. But I was so scared, Caleb. I'm still scared. I've never been without him, not since we met. And watching you two together, it was like you had this whole history I could never be part of. Inside jokes from high school, shared memories from before I existed in his life. I felt like I was losing him twice. Once to the disease and once to you. It wasn't a competition, I said softly. Everything feels like a competition when you're losing everything, he replied. But I was wrong. I see that now. I stole time from both of you. Time you can't get back. I'll have to live with that. We lapsed back into silence, but it felt less hostile somehow. We were just two people who loved the same person, watching him slip away bit by bit. A few days later, Ellison took a sharp turn for the worse. His breathing became more labored, and he struggled to stay conscious for more than minutes at a time. The nurse increased his morphine, which eased his pain but stole what little clarity remained. During one of his lucid moments, he asked to see the Costa Rica tickets. David brought them from home, 3 plane tickets, dated for the following year, to San Jose. Ellison held them with shaking hands, tracing the text with one finger. Still want to go, he mumbled. All 3. Together. We will, David promised, his voice breaking. We'll take you there. Ellison smiled and closed his eyes. He didn't open them again. For the next 36 hours, David and I kept vigil. We stopped coordinating visits, both simply staying. Ellison's sister came and went. Other friends stopped by to say goodbye, but David and I remained constant fixtures on either side of his bed. We talked during those long hours, really talked for the first time in months. About Ellison, about our friendship, about the future none of us would have together. David told me about their plans to adopt, about the house they'd been looking at with a yard for kids to play in. I told him about the investment account I'd started for our retirement community, how I'd been researching the best places for aging and comfort together. He was the center, David said at one point, exhaustion making him philosophical. The sun we both orbited around. What happens when the sun goes out? I didn't have an answer. I couldn't imagine a world without Ellison in it, without his laugh, his brilliant mind, his terrible taste in coffee. But I was about to find out. On a gray Tuesday morning, with rain pattering against the hospice windows, Ellison's breathing changed. The nurse called it Cheney-Stokes breathing, explained it was a sign the end was near. David and I each held one of his hands, our own differences forgotten in the face of losing him. It's okay, David whispered, tears streaming down his face. You can go, baby. We'll be okay. We'll take care of each other. I squeezed Ellison's hand gently. We'll take you to Costa Rica, I promised. All 3 of us, just like we planned. You'll love the beaches. Whether he hurt us or not, I'll never know. But his breathing slowed, then stopped altogether. The nurse checked for a pulse, then quietly noted the time. 11:47 a.m. Just like that, Ellison was gone. David and I sat there for a long time, still holding his hands, unable to let go. Eventually, the nurse gently suggested we say our final goodbyes. David went first, pressing his face against Ellison's chest, whispering words I couldn't hear. When he stepped back, his face was ravaged with grief. I took my turn, smoothing Ellison's hair back, telling him I loved him, that I'd miss him every day, that I'd never forget our plans and dreams. I tucked the Costa Rica tickets into his hand, then thought better of it and took them back. We'd need them to keep our promise. The funeral was held a week later. David asked me to speak, a gesture that meant more than he probably knew. I stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd of people whose lives Ellison had touched, and told them about my best friend, about his brilliant mind and terrible jokes, about his kindness and loyalty, about the future we'd all lost when we lost him. David spoke too, about their love story, about the man who'd changed his life. He broke down halfway through, and I found myself moving to stand beside him, offering silent support. We finished the eulogy together, 2 voices speaking about the same remarkable person. After the service, as people offered condolences and shared memories, David pulled me aside. The tickets, he said quietly. I meant what I said. When you're ready, we should go. All 3 of us. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before David suddenly hugged me. It was brief, clumsy, but genuine. I'm sorry, he whispered, for everything. He'd hate that we spent his last months fighting. He'd forgive us, I said, and knew it was true. Ellison had always been quick to forgive, quick to see the best in people, but we should probably try to do better. For him. David pulled back, wiping his eyes. For him, he agreed. The months that followed were strange and difficult. David and I texted occasionally, checking in on each other. We met for coffee once, spending most of it in silence, but it was a companionable silence. We were like survivors of the same shipwreck, clinging to the debris of our shared loss. On what would have been Ellison's 40th birthday, David texted me, "Are you ready?" I knew immediately what he meant. Yes. We met at the airport, each carrying a small portion of Ellison's ashes in identical urns. The flight to Costa Rica was quiet, both of us lost in memories. But when we landed, when we stepped out into the warm tropical air, something shifted. He would have loved this, David said, looking around at the lush landscape. right. He would have complained about the humidity, I corrected, and we both laughed. It felt strange to laugh, but also right. Ellison wouldn't have wanted endless mourning. We traveled to the beach we'd researched years ago, the one where we planned to spend our retirement. It was as beautiful as the photos had promised: white sand, clear blue water, palm trees swaying in the breeze. We walked to the water's edge, each holding our urn. Should we say something? David asked. I thought for a moment. How about a joke? One last terrible joke for the road? David smiled sadly. He'd like that. I cleared my throat. Ellison, buddy, this one's for you. What do you call a three-legged donkey? David looked at me expectantly. A wonky. He groaned, but he was smiling. That's awful. He would have loved it. Together we opened the urns and let Ellison's ashes scatter in the warm Caribbean water. We stood there for a long time, watching the waves carry him away, carrying our friend to his final adventure. You know, David said eventually. He left me a letter, to be opened after. He said he wrote one for you too. It's at the house. I should have given it to you sooner, but you weren't ready. I finished. I understand. We spent 3 days in Costa Rica, using all 3 tickets as promised. We visited the places Ellison had marked in his travel guides, ate at restaurants he'd bookmarked, even suffered through a ziplining adventure he'd insisted would be fun. Slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild our friendship. On the last night, sitting on the beach with beers in hand, David finally gave me Ellison's letter. I opened it with trembling hands, recognizing his handwriting even though it was shaky from the disease. Caleb, it read, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you're probably pretty mad at me for leaving. Sorry about that. By now you know what David did. Please don't hate him. He's a good man who did a stupid thing out of fear. Sound familiar? Remember when you hid my acceptance letter to MIT because you didn't want me to leave for college? We forgave each other then. Forgive each other now. I don't know how much time I have left as I write this, but I know it's not enough. It's never enough, is it? But whatever time remains, I want you both in it. You're my 2 favorite people in the world. Take care of each other. Make terrible jokes. Go on adventures. Live the life we planned, even if I can't be there for it. Thank you for being my best friend. Thank you for the laughter, the support, the truly awful puns. Thank you for trying so hard to see me, even when David made it impossible. Thank you for not giving up. I love you, buddy. Always have, always will. Now stop crying and go live your life. That's an order from your dying friend, so you have to do it. P.S. The retirement fund you started? David knows about it. I may have told him you were planning to buy the place next door to wherever we ended up, so you could maintain some independence while still being close. He pretended to be annoyed, but I caught him looking at real estate listings for adjacent properties. You two are more alike than you think. P.P.S. What do you call a bear in the rain? A drizzly bear. I'm dying, and that's still terrible. Some things never change. I was crying by the end, ugly sobbing on a beautiful beach while David sat beside me, pretending not to notice. When I finally composed myself, I folded the letter carefully and tucked it away. He was right, you know, David said quietly. We are alike. We both loved him so much we made stupid choices trying to hold on to him. Yeah, I agreed, but he forgave us. Both of us. Think we can forgive each other? I looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't the enemy I'd painted him as in my anger. He was just a man who'd lost his husband, who'd let grief and fear drive him to cruelty. I'd lost my best friend, but he'd lost his entire future. I think we can try, I said. For him. David raised his beer. To Ellison, the best man either of us ever knew. To Ellison, I echoed, clinking my bottle against his. And to terrible jokes, impossible plans, and the friendships that survive everything. We drank in silence, watching the sun set over the ocean, 2 men bound together by loss and love and the memory of someone extraordinary. It wasn't the retirement we planned, wasn't the future any of us had imagined, but it was what we had, and somehow, that had to be enough. The next morning, we flew home together. At the airport, before we went our separate ways, David paused. Next year? He asked. Same time? We could make it a tradition. Bring him back to the beach. He'd probably prefer we go somewhere new, I said. You know how he loved to explore. Maybe Europe? He always wanted to see the northern lights. David smiled, a real smile for the first time in months. Norway it is. I'll book 3 tickets. 3? He comes with us. Always. That's the deal. I nodded, my throat tight. That's the deal. We hugged goodbye. Longer this time. Less awkward. We weren't best friends. Might never be what we were before. But we were something. 2 people who'd loved and lost the same irreplaceable person, trying to honor his memory by honoring his wishes. As I drove home, I thought about Ellison's letter, about forgiveness and moving forward. I thought about David's suggestion of annual trips, of carrying Ellison with us on adventures he'd never get to take. It wasn't the future we'd planned, but it was a future nonetheless. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Found a journal entry of his. He wrote, C&D had lunch without me today. Spent the whole time arguing about whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Idiots. It obviously is. I love them both so much it hurts. Thought you should know. I had to pull over, overwhelmed by the simple present tense of I love them. Even gone, Ellison's love remained, bridging the gap between David and me, refusing to let death be the end of everything. It's obviously not a Christmas movie, I texted back, but he always had terrible taste in films. Agreed. Terrible taste. The worst. Miss arguing with him about it. Me too. And just like that, we were talking. Not about logistics or arrangements, but about Ellison. Sharing memories, inside jokes David had been part of that I'd forgotten, moments I'd missed during those lost 3 months. Each text was a small rebellion against grief, a tiny victory over the silence death tried to impose. That night, I pulled out the Costa Rica tickets, our original ones, the ones Ellison had saved for our retirement. I pinned them to my bulletin board, right next to a photo of the 3 of us from David and Ellison's wedding. We were all laughing at something, arms around each other, impossibly young and unaware of what was coming. But maybe that was the point. We never know what's coming. All we can do is love fiercely, forgive readily, and hold on to each other through whatever comes. Ellison had taught us that, in his living and in his dying. I raised a glass of his favorite whiskey to the photo. Here's to you, buddy. Here's to terrible jokes and impossible plans and friendships that survive everything, even death, even this. Somewhere I was certain Ellison was laughing at the sentimentality, and probably working on an even worse pun. I stared at the photo, my vision blurring. The 3 of us, frozen in time at David and Ellison's wedding reception. Ellison's arm draped over my shoulder, David's hand on Ellison's waist, all of us mid-laugh at some forgotten joke. The whiskey burned my throat as I took another sip. My phone vibrated again. David found his lab notebook. He'd written, "Tell C about the particle accelerator malfunction in the margins. Did he ever tell you?" I smiled despite myself. The one where he accidentally magnetized his lab coat? He called me from the bathroom, couldn't get out because his coat kept sticking to the metal door. That explains why he came home shirtless that day. Said he'd spilled coffee. He made me swear not to tell you. Said you'd worry too much about lab safety. I would have. Did worry. Still do. Even though David's typing sleeping indicator appeared and disappeared several times before the next message came through. Can't break the habit of worrying about him. I understood. Sometimes I still reached for my phone to text Ellison about something stupid I'd seen, my thumb hovering over his contact before reality crashed back. The next few weeks passed in a strange rhythm. David and I texted sporadically, sharing memories or practical matters about Ellison's estate. We met once to go through his things, standing in their bedroom, sorting through clothes that still smelled faintly of his cologne. We worked in mostly comfortable silence. His lucky conference shirt. David held up a faded blue button-down with a small stain on the pocket. He wore this to every presentation. The coffee stains from his thesis defense, I said. He was so nervous he knocked over my cup right before going on stage. Insisted it turned into good luck. David folded it carefully, placing it in the key box. We both knew neither of us would wear it, but throwing it away felt impossible. Later, going through Ellison's desk, I found the research I'd compiled during those 3 months of exile. Printouts about experimental treatments, clinical trials, support groups, all useless now, but evidence of my desperate need to help somehow. David picked up one of the packets, scanning it. Gene therapy trials at Johns Hopkins. He read, "You really did your homework. I had to do something. Couldn't just sit there while I trailed off while I kept you away." David set the papers down. I told myself I was protecting him, but really, I think I was protecting myself from having to share him, from seeing how much he needed you too. We continued sorting in silence. In the bottom drawer, wrapped in tissue paper, were 3 matching compass keychains. A note in Ellison's handwriting, for when we're old and forgetful, so we can always find our way back to each other. David's hands shook as he picked them up. He bought these last year, before the symptoms started. Said he wanted to give them to us at Christmas. I took one, running my thumb over the engraving. True North. The weight of it felt significant in my palm. "Keep it," David said, pocketing his own. He'd want you to have it. We placed the 3rd compass in the small urn we'd kept back from Costa Rica. Ellison would travel with us, always pointing the way. A month later, David called. Not a text, an actual phone call. "I'm cleaning out his office at the university. Could use help. It's a lot." I met him outside the physics building where Ellison had spent so many late nights. The security guard recognized me, offering condolences. Dr. Andrew was good people. Always brought extra coffee for the night shift. Ellison's office was exactly as he'd left it. Whiteboards covered in equations I couldn't understand. Stacks of student papers waiting for grades they'd never receive. A half-dead succulent on the windowsill. "His students don't know what happened," David said. "The department just told them he was on medical leave." We spent hours boxing up books, files, personal items. I found myself reading the margins of his notebooks, seeing his thought process in the scribbled notes and doodles. David tackled the computer, downloading files and research data. "Password?" I asked when he got stuck at the login screen. David tried several combinations before slumping back. "I don't know. He changed it recently." I looked at the sticky note on his monitor, seemingly random numbers, but knowing Ellison. "Try the coordinates for Costa Rica, the beach we picked." David typed them in. The screen unlocked. "Of course," he said softly. Even his passwords were about us. We found videos on his computer, lectures he'd recorded for his students, but also personal ones. David's finger hovered over a file dated 2 weeks before his collapse. We exchanged glances, then David clicked play. Ellison appeared on screen, already showing signs of the disease, but still himself. "Hey, future me," he said to the camera. "Or whoever finds this." David, probably. "Hi, baby." His voice caught. "I'm recording this because I'm scared I'm going to forget things. Important things. Like how Caleb can't eat seafood without turning green. Or how David reorganizes the spice rack when he's anxious. Or how we all fit perfectly on our couch, even though it's technically just a love seat." I had to look away. David paused the video, his breathing unsteady. "Should we?" I started. "Not yet," David said. "Not here. But would you want to watch them together sometime?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. We finished packing in relative quiet, occasionally sharing a memory triggered by some object. Ellison's emergency bow tie. For surprise formal events, he'd insisted. His collection of conference badges. The photo of the 3 of us he'd kept on his desk. As we carried the last box to David's car, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "Ellison's lawyer. I should take this." I loaded the box while David paced nearby, his responses growing increasingly confused. "What do you mean, additional documentation? I thought we handled everything." "A video will? When did he?" "Okay, yes, tomorrow works." He hung up, looking stunned. Ellison recorded a video will, specifically requested both of us be present for the viewing. The lawyer's office was sterile and intimidating. David and I sat in uncomfortable chairs while Mr. Patel, an elderly man with kind eyes, set up the video. "Dr. Andrew recorded this 3 weeks before his passing," he explained. He was quite specific about the instructions. Ellison appeared on screen, propped up in what I recognized as their living room. He looked frailer than in the office video, but his eyes were clear. "Hi guys," he said, managing a weak smile. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you're probably really confused about why I'm putting you through more legal stuff. Sorry about that, but I needed to make sure some things happened, and I couldn't trust either of you stubborn idiots to do them without explicit instructions." Despite everything, I found myself almost laughing. Even dying, Ellison knew us too well. First, the practical stuff. "David, baby, the house is yours. But Caleb, I've set aside money for you to buy the place next door when it goes on the market. Mrs. M. Henderson is moving to Florida next year. I may have had a conversation with her. I know you both think I'm crazy, but humor your dead friend, okay? You need each other more than you realize." David made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Second, my research. There's a paper I never got to finish on quantum entanglement. You'll find the notes in the blue folder. Caleb, you won't understand a word of it, but make sure David gets it to my colleague, Dr. Sarah Kim. She'll know what to do. David, let her put my name on it. I know you hate posthumous publications, but I'm dead, so I win this argument." The video continued with more instructions, charitable donations, which of his books went to which colleague, detailed notes about his succulent collection. "Caleb gets the big one. David, you'll cull it within a week." Then his expression grew serious. "Now the hard part. I know what happened. I know David kept you apart, Caleb. I know you tried to respect what you thought were my wishes. You're both idiots, but you're my idiots." He paused, clearly gathering strength. "David, I need you to hear this. Caleb never crossed any boundaries. He never tried to replace you or compete with you. He was just being my friend, the same way he's been since we were 17. And I needed that. I needed both of you, in different ways. You took that choice from me, and we lost 3 months we couldn't afford to lose." David's head dropped into his hands. "But," Ellison continued, "I forgive you, because I know it came from love and fear and grief. The same reason Caleb forgives you. The same reason you need to forgive yourself." He shifted slightly, wincing. "Caleb, you're going to want to retreat. It's what you do when you're hurt. Don't. David needs you, whether he admits it or not. And you need him. You're the only 2 people in the world who who understand what we had together. Another pause. Which brings me to my last request. The trips we planned, I want you to take them. All of them. Together. I know it'll be awkward at first, but tough. Consider it my dying wish. Take me with you. I want to see everywhere we dreamed about. And I want you two to learn how to be friends again. Real friends. Not just people who tolerate each other because of me. He smiled then. That mischievous grin I remembered. I've left money for the trips. Enough for the fancy hotels we always joked about. First-class flights because Caleb, your legs are too long for coach. And David, you get cranky without legroom. Take the time. Take the trips. Take care of each other. The video flickered. I'm getting tired, so I'll wrap this up. Thank you both for loving me. Thank you for the adventures and the quiet moments and the terrible jokes. Thank you for making my life so much bigger than I ever imagined it could be. I love you both. Always have, always will. Now go live your lives. That's an order. The screen went black. We sat in silence for a long moment before Mr. Patel cleared his throat. There are some papers to sign. Whenever you're ready. We handled the paperwork in a daze. Outside the office, we stood awkwardly on the sidewalk. Did you know? I asked. About Mrs. Henderson? David shook his head. He never said anything. But that's Ellison. Planning our lives even when his was ending. We don't have to do it, I said quickly. The house thing. Or the trips. He'd understand. No, David said firmly. We're doing it. All of it. Because he's right, we're both too stubborn to do it without explicit instructions. He attempted a smile. Besides, you heard him. It's an order. 6 weeks later, I stood in Mrs. Henderson's living room, holding a set of keys. The house was smaller than David's. A 1920s bungalow with original hardwood and a view of their kitchen window from mine. Ellison was such a sweet boy, Mrs. Henderson said, patting my arm. Came by last year. Said he had a friend who'd love the house. Didn't mention he was sick. I would have moved sooner if I'd known. David helped me move in, both of us pretending it wasn't weird. We discovered Ellison had been planning this for months. There were sketches in his desk of the two properties, ideas for connecting gardens, notes about shared driveways. He drew a bridge, David said, showing me the sketch, between the two houses. For rainy days, he wrote. We didn't build a bridge, but we did install a gate in the fence between the yards. The first trip came 3 months later, Norway, as promised. We met at the airport, both carrying our portion of Ellison's ashes, both wearing our compass keychains. This is weird, David said as we boarded. Super weird, I agreed. But somehow, we made it work. We bickered about restaurants, got lost in Bergen despite having GPS, stayed up too late drinking expensive whiskey, and when we finally saw the northern lights, spreading Ellison's ashes in the Arctic wind, we both cried without shame. He would have complained about the cold, David said, watching the lights dance across the sky, then insisted on staying out here anyway, I added. We took a photo, the two of us with the lights behind us, holding up the empty urn. It felt wrong without Ellison between us, but also somehow right. The trips became routine. Every few months, we'd pick a destination from Ellison's list. Japan during cherry blossom season, New Zealand for the hiking trails, Egypt for the pyramids he'd always wanted to see. Slowly, awkwardly, we rebuilt our friendship. Not the same as before, that was impossible, but something new, forged from shared grief and shared love, and the ghost of someone extraordinary who refused to let death be the end of everything. A year after Ellison's death, we were in Iceland, soaking in a geothermal spa. David had been quiet all day, and I was about to ask what was wrong when he spoke. I'm seeing someone. The words hung in the steamy air. I wasn't sure how to respond. It's new, he continued quickly. Really new, and I feel guilty about it, like I'm betraying him. You're not, I said, meaning it. Ellison would want you to be happy. I know, logically I know that, but knowing and feeling are different things. He nodded. His name's Dave. He's a teacher. Nothing like Ellison, which somehow makes it both easier and harder. We floated in silence for a while. I'm glad, I finally said. Really, you deserve to be happy again. Thanks. He hesitated. You could come to dinner sometime. Meet him, if you want. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. The conversation opened something between us. We started talking about things beyond Ellison, my disastrous dating attempts, David's navigation of grief while starting something new, work frustrations, family drama. We were becoming actual friends again, not just co-mourners. On the second anniversary of Ellison's death, we were in Costa Rica again. Same beach, same hotel. We'd made it a tradition. This trip was always just for him, just for remembering. I brought something, David said, pulling out a worn notebook. His last journal, first period. I haven't been able to read it. Thought maybe together? We sat on the beach, passing the journal between us, reading Ellison's increasingly shaky handwriting. Notes about good days and bad days, medication side effects, dreams he was having, and throughout, mentions of us. C called today. D wouldn't let me answer. I'm too tired to fight about it. Dreamed we were in Costa Rica. All three of us, old and wrinkled and still laughing at C's terrible jokes. D is scared, can see it in his eyes. Wish C was here. They'd balance each other out. Told D about the houses. He thinks I'm crazy. Maybe I am, but they need each other. Hope they figure that out. The last entry was barely legible. Dated 2 days before he entered hospice. Love them both so much. Hope they know. Hope they remember. Hope they forgive. We closed the journal, both of us crying freely. The sun was setting, painting the sky in impossible colors. We should do something, I said. Mark the occasion somehow. David thought for a moment, then stood, pulling me up. Race you to the water. Loser buys dinner. It was ridiculous. We were two grown men, fully dressed, racing into the ocean like children, but Ellison would have loved it. We crashed into the waves, laughing and sputtering, ruining our clothes and not caring at all. Later, sitting in the hotel restaurant in borrowed dry clothes, David raised his glass to Ellison, who somehow got the last word even after death. To Ellison, I agreed, and to terrible jokes, impossible plans, and friendships that survive everything, even death, David added, especially death. We drank, and for the first time in 2 years, the ache in my chest felt manageable. Not gone, it would never be gone, but bearable. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah Kim, Ellison's colleague. Paper accepted for publication. Quantum Entanglement in Modified Fields by E. Andrew, S. Kim et al. He would have been so proud. I showed David, who smiled through fresh tears. He did it. Even gone, he's still contributing. Still showing off, you mean? I said, but fondly. We spent the rest of the evening sharing stories, planning our next trip, Peru for Machu Picchu, discussing the paper publication. Normal friend things, if you ignored the small urn on the table between us. As we walked back to our rooms, David paused. Thank you for not giving up. On him, on us, on any of it. Thank you for letting me back in. Eventually. He laughed. A real laugh. Ellison was right. We really are both idiots. The biggest. I agreed. We hugged goodnight, no longer awkward about it. Tomorrow we'd fly home, back to our connected houses and separate lives that would never be quite separate again. We'd continue the trips, the traditions, the careful cultivation of a friendship neither of us had expected to need so much. And And somewhere, in the quantum field Ellison had studied so passionately, in the connections between particles that couldn't be broken by distance or time or even death, our friend was still with us, still bringing us together, still refusing to let go. I looked up at the stars, countless and brilliant in the clear Costa Rican sky. "Thanks, buddy," I whispered, "for everything, for always knowing what we needed, even when we didn't, especially when we didn't." A warm breeze rustled the palm trees, carrying the scent of ocean and flowers and possibility. It felt like an answer. It felt like goodbye. It felt like hello. It felt like Ellison, making sure we were okay. One terrible joke and impossible plan at a time.